The rain battered the cafe window, each drop a tiny plea for attention. But Ethan barely noticed. His world had crumbled in a sterile courtroom 3 weeks ago, where his marriage to Sarah ended with a judge's gavel and a signature on a dotted line. At 28, he felt like a ghost haunting his own life, sitting alone in a New York cafe with a coffee he hadn't touched. He stared at the mug, its steam curling like a memory he couldn't grasp. Divorce wasn't supposed to feel like this, like losing a limb you didn't know you needed until it was gone. Around him, the hum of conversations felt like static, disconnected from the ache in his chest. Then, a voice broke through. "Mind if I sit here?" "Place is packed." Ethan looked up to see a man, maybe his age, with short blonde hair and eyes that held a quiet kindness. He wore a faded denim jacket, and his smile was hesitant, like he wasn't sure it would be welcomed. Ethan nodded, too tired to protest, and the stranger slid into the seat across from him. "I'm Lucas," the man said, setting down his own coffee. "You look like you could use some company." Ethan's instinct was to shrug it off, to retreat into the shell he'd built since the divorce. But something in Lucas's voice, soft, unintrusive, made him pause. "I'm not great company right now," Ethan muttered, his voice rough. Lucas leaned forward, unfazed. "That's okay. I'm not looking for great. Just real." Those words hit Ethan like a lifeline tossed into a stormy sea. He didn't know why, but he started talking about the divorce, the loneliness, the way he felt like he was drowning in a city of millions. Lucas listened, his eyes never leaving Ethan's, his presence steady like an anchor. Hours passed, the cafe emptying around them. Lucas shared his own story, a small-town kid from Ohio who moved to New York to chase dreams of being a painter, only to find himself working as a barista to pay rent. He talked about his own struggles coming out as gay at 19, losing friends, rebuilding his life. Ethan listened, surprised by how Lucas's openness made his own pain feel less heavy. As the cafe lights dimmed, Lucas reached across the table and placed a hand on Ethan's arm. "You're not alone in this. You know." The touch was brief, warm, and it sent a jolt through Ethan, not of attraction, not yet, but of something he hadn't felt in years, connection. They exchanged numbers before parting ways. Ethan walked home through the rain, his heart a little lighter, unaware that this chance encounter would unravel everything he thought he knew about himself. The next morning, Ethan woke to a text from Lucas, "Coffee again." "Same place, 6 p.m. He stared at the message, his thumb hovering over the reply button. He wasn't sure what he was feeling, curiosity, maybe, or something deeper he couldn't name. But he typed back, "Sure." When he arrived at the cafe, Lucas was already there, sketching in a worn notebook. Ethan watched him for a moment, noticing the way his brow furrowed in concentration, the way his fingers moved with purpose. "You're good," Ethan said, sliding into the seat. Lucas grinned, closing the notebook. "Thanks. It's the one thing that keeps me sane." They talked again, this time about lighter things: movies, music, the absurdity of New York's subway system. But beneath the surface, Ethan felt a pull, a quiet current drawing him toward Lucas. Over the next few weeks, their coffee meetups became a ritual. Ethan found himself looking forward to them, craving the way Lucas's laughter made his chest feel less tight. One night, as they walked through Central Park, Lucas stopped to point out a constellation. "See that? That's Orion. My dad used to show me the stars back home." Ethan looked up, but his eyes drifted to Lucas's face, illuminated by the park's soft lights. For the first time in months, he felt the urge to reach out, to touch someone not out of need, but out of want. He didn't act on it, but the feeling lingered, confusing and exhilarating. Their friendship grew, But so did the tension. Ethan wasn't ready to name it, wasn't ready to face what it might mean. He'd spent his life believing he was straight, building a world with Sarah that had seemed so certain. Now, every glance from Lucas, every brush of their hands, felt like a question he didn't know how to answer. One evening, after a long day at his accounting job, Ethan found himself at Lucas's tiny studio apartment. Lucas was painting, his hands streaked with color, his focus intense. "You ever try this?" Lucas asked, holding out a brush. Ethan laughed, nervous. "I'd ruin it." "Ruin it?" "Nah. Just feel it." Lucas guided Ethan's hand to the canvas, their fingers brushing. The air felt charged, and Ethan's heart raced. He pulled back, suddenly overwhelmed. "Two should go," he stammered, retreating to the door. Lucas didn't push, but his eyes were steady. "Whenever you're ready, Ethan. I'm here." That night, alone in his apartment, Ethan couldn't sleep. He replayed every moment with Lucas, the talks, the touches, the way his heart seemed to wake up in Lucas's presence. Was this just friendship? Or was it something more? Something he'd never allowed himself to consider? The question haunted him, but so did the warmth of Lucas's hand on his arm that first night in the cafe. For the first time since the divorce, Ethan felt something other than loss, possibility. Ethan's days began to revolve around Lucas, though he wouldn't admit it to himself. Their meetups shifted from the cafe to late-night walks through Brooklyn, where the city's pulse seemed to sync with the rhythm of their conversations. Lucas had a way of making the world feel smaller, safer, like every story Ethan shared was a treasure worth keeping. But the questions in Ethan's mind grew louder. He'd catch himself staring at Lucas's hands as he gestured animatedly, or noticing the curve of his jaw when he laughed. These moments stirred something unfamiliar, a warmth that felt both thrilling and terrifying. Ethan had never questioned his sexuality before. His life with Sarah had been a straight line, predictable, until it wasn't. Now, every step felt like a leap into the unknown. One chilly October evening, Lucas invited Ethan to an art gallery opening where one of his paintings was on display. The gallery was a small, crowded space in Soho, filled with people sipping wine and murmuring about brushstrokes. Ethan felt out of place in his button-down shirt, surrounded by artsy types in bold colors and eclectic scarves. But Lucas was in his element, his eyes bright as he explained his painting, a vibrant abstract of blues and golds, like a storm breaking into sunlight. "It's about finding light in chaos," Lucas said, his voice soft but proud. Ethan looked at the canvas, then at Lucas, and felt a pang of something he couldn't name. "It's beautiful," he said, meaning more than the painting. After the gallery, they ended up at a dive bar nearby, the kind with sticky floors and a jukebox that played old Springsteen songs. Lucas ordered them beers, and they sat in a booth, the noise of the bar fading into the background. "You ever feel like you're running from something, but you don't know what?" Ethan asked, the words spilling out before he could stop them. Lucas tilted his head, studying him. "All the time. For me, it was who I was. Took years to stop running and just be." Ethan swallowed, his throat tight. "How did you know?" "That you were." He couldn't finish the sentence, but Lucas understood. "It wasn't one moment," Lucas said, his voice gentle. "It was 1,000 little ones. A crush I couldn't explain. A feeling I couldn't shake. I just let myself feel it. You know. No judgment." Ethan nodded, but his mind was spinning. He wanted to ask more, to understand, but the words felt stuck. Instead, he took a long sip of his beer, letting Lucas's words settle like a seed in his chest. The next week, Ethan's confusion reached a breaking point. He canceled their usual coffee meetup, claiming he was swamped at work. But the truth was he needed space. Every time he was with Lucas, the line between friendship and something more blurred, and it scared him. He spent nights Googling terms like questioning sexuality and late in life coming out. Each article a mirror he wasn't ready to face. But Lucas didn't let him retreat completely. He texted Ethan a photo of a street mural burst of color with the words "BU" painted in bold letters. "Saw this and thought of you," the message read. Ethan stared at it, his chest aching with something he couldn't ignore. They met again a few days later, this time at a quiet bookstore in the East Village. Lucas was flipping through a poetry collection, reading lines aloud in a low, melodic voice. Ethan watched him, the way his lips moved, the way his eyes lit up at a particularly beautiful phrase. Without thinking, Ethan reached out and touched Lucas's hand, just for a moment. Lucas froze, then smiled, his fingers curling slightly around Ethan's. "You okay?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded, though he wasn't sure. "I don't know what I'm doing," he admitted. "But I know I don't want to stop seeing you." Lucas's smile widened, but he didn't push. "Then don't." That night, as they walked through the city, Ethan felt the weight of his own uncertainty. He wasn't ready to label what he felt, but he knew Lucas was becoming a part of him, a part he didn't want to lose. The city lights blurred around them, and for the first time, Ethan let himself imagine what it might be like to hold Lucas's hand a little longer. Winter crept into New York, blanketing the city in a chill that matched the uncertainty in Ethan's heart. His days were a tug-of-war between wanting to be near Lucas and fearing what that desire meant. He'd catch himself smiling at Lucas's texts, then spiraling into doubt about what it all signified. One snowy evening, Lucas invited Ethan to his apartment for dinner. Nothing fancy, he'd said, just pasta and some music. Ethan arrived with a bottle of wine, his nerves jangling like loose change. Lucas's apartment was small but warm, filled with mismatched furniture and half-finished canvases. A record player spun a soft jazz tune, and the smell of garlic and tomatoes filled the air. They ate at a tiny table, their knees brushing under it. Lucas talked about his latest painting, a commission for a local cafe, but Ethan was distracted, his eyes tracing the lines of Lucas's face. "You're quiet tonight," Lucas said, setting down his fork. Ethan hesitated, then let the truth spill out. "I'm scared, Lucas. I don't know what this is what we are. I was married to a woman. I'm not supposed to feel this way." Lucas leaned forward, his expression soft but serious. "There's no supposed to here, Ethan. You feel what you feel. The only question is what you want to do about it." Ethan's throat tightened. What if I mess this up? What if I'm not enough? Lucas reached across the table, his hand covering Ethan's. "You're enough just being you. Whatever this is, we figure it out together." The words broke something open in Ethan. He didn't pull his hand away this time. Instead, he let Lucas's warmth anchor him, let the moment stretch until the jazz record ended and the room fell silent. After dinner, they sat on Lucas's couch, a blanket draped over their legs. Lucas showed Ethan old photos from his childhood in Ohio, grainy images of a freckled kid with a wide grin. "This is me before I knew who I was," Lucas said, his voice tinged with nostalgia. "Took a long time to get here." Ethan looked at the photos, then at Lucas. "I wish I had your courage." "You do," Lucas said. "You're here, aren't you?" That night, as Ethan left, Lucas hugged him at the door, a real hug, not a fleeting touch. Ethan felt his body relax into it, the weight of his fears lifting just enough to breathe. He walked home through the snow, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. The next few weeks were a dance of closeness and hesitation. Ethan started opening up more, sharing stories of his childhood in upstate New York, his dreams of being a writer before he settled for accounting. Lucas listened, his presence a steady light in Ethan's fog of self-doubt. But not everyone was supportive. Ethan's best friend, Mark, noticed his preoccupation and pressed him for details. When Ethan mentioned Lucas, Mark's face hardened. "You're just confused. Man. Divorce does that. Don't do something you'll regret." The words stung, planting seeds of doubt. Ethan began to pull back again, canceling plans with Lucas, replying to texts with one-word answers. Lucas sensed the shift but didn't push, giving Ethan space to wrestle with his fears. One night, alone in his apartment, Ethan found an old journal from his college days. Flipping through it, he found a passage about feeling lost, about wanting to be seen for who he was, not who he was supposed to be. The words felt like a message from his younger self, urging him to be brave. He picked up his phone and texted Lucas, "Can we talk?" "Tomorrow." Lucas's reply was instant, always. Ethan didn't know what he'd say, but he knew he couldn't keep running. Not from Lucas, and not from himself. The next day, Ethan met Lucas at a quiet pier along the Hudson River. The winter sun hung low, casting a golden glow over the water. Lucas stood leaning against the railing, his breath visible in the cold air, his eyes searching Ethan's face as he approached. "I've been a mess," Ethan started, his voice shaky. "I keep pulling away, and it's not fair to you. I'm figuring things out." Lucas nodded, his expression patient. "Take your time, Ethan. I'm not going anywhere." They walked along the pier, their footsteps crunching in the snow. Ethan told Lucas about Mark's words, about the doubt they'd stirred. "He thinks I'm just confused. Maybe he's right. Maybe this is all just temporary." Lucas stopped, turning to face him. "Do you feel like it's temporary?" Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted to say no, to admit that every moment with Lucas felt like a step towards something real, but fear held him back. Instead, he said, "I don't know. I've never felt like this before." Lucas's eyes softened. "That's okay. Not knowing is part of it. Just don't shut me out." They kept walking, the city's skyline a jagged silhouette against the sky. Ethan felt the weight of Lucas's words, the permission to be uncertain. For the first time, he let himself imagine a future where he didn't have to have all the answers. Over the next month, their connection deepened. They spent weekends exploring the city museums, food trucks, hidden bookstores. Lucas introduced Ethan to his friends, a tight-knit group of artists and dreamers who welcomed him without judgment. Ethan felt like he was waking up, like the world was brighter in their company. But the shadow of doubt lingered. Ethan's family, conservative and distant, loomed in his mind. He hadn't told them about Lucas, hadn't even told them about the divorce. The thought of their disapproval of their rejection made his stomach churn. One evening, Lucas took Ethan to a drag show in the village, a riot of color and music that left Ethan laughing harder than he had in years. Afterward, they sat on a rooftop, the city sprawling beneath them. Lucas was quieter than usual, his hands fidgeting. "Something's on your mind," Ethan said, nudging him. Lucas took a deep breath. "I like you, Ethan. A lot. And I think you feel something too. But I need to know if you're in this, or if I'm just hoping for something that's not there." The words hung between them, heavy and raw. Ethan's heart raced. He wanted to say yes, to leap into the unknown, but the fear of losing everything, his family, his identity, clamped down on him. "I need time," he said finally, his voice barely audible. Lucas nodded, his eyes sad but understanding. "I'll wait. But not forever." That night, Ethan lay awake, replaying Lucas's words. He thought about the life he'd built, the one he'd lost, and the one he might find if he was brave enough. The next morning, he called his sister, Emily, the only family member he trusted. He told her everything about the divorce, about Lucas, about the confusion and the hope. Emily listened, then said, "Ethan, you deserve to be happy. Whoever that's with. Don't let fear decide for you." Her words were a lifeline, pulling him back from the edge of doubt. He knew what he had to do. Ethan spent the next week wrestling with his decision. He wanted Lucas in his life, but the leap felt like stepping off a cliff. He started journaling again, pouring out his fears and hopes in messy, honest words. Each entry brought him closer to clarity, to the truth he'd been avoiding. He was falling for Lucas. He invited Lucas to his apartment, a small one-bedroom in Brooklyn that still felt half empty without Sarah's things. Lucas arrived with a bottle of wine and a nervous smile. They sat on the couch, the tension between them palpable. "I've been thinking," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. "About you. About us. I'm scared, Lucas, but I don't want to lose you. I want to try, whatever this is." Lucas's face lit up, but he kept his voice calm. "You sure?" "Because I'm all in, Ethan. But only if you are." Ethan nodded, his heart pounding. "I'm in." They didn't kiss. Not yet. But Lucas reached for Ethan's hand, lacing their fingers together, and the simple act felt like a promise. They talked late into the night, about fears, dreams, and the messy beauty of starting over. The next few months were a blur of discovery. Ethan learned to navigate his feelings, to embrace the parts of himself he'd kept hidden. Lucas was patient, guiding him through moments of doubt with quiet strength. They went on their first official date, a picnic in Prospect Park, where Lucas teased Ethan about his terrible sandwich-making skills. But the world wasn't always kind. Ethan's parents, when he finally told them about Lucas, reacted with silence, then disapproval. "This isn't you, Ethan," his father said over the phone. "You're just confused." The words cut deep, but Ethan held his ground. "This is me," he said, "and I'm not hiding anymore." His mother's response was softer, but still hesitant. "We just need time, Ethan." He hung up feeling raw, but Lucas was there, his arms open, his hug a reminder that Ethan wasn't alone. Their relationship grew, marked by small, beautiful moments: a shared umbrella in a rainstorm, a late-night dance in Lucas's apartment, a painting Lucas made just for Ethan, its colors bold and unapologetic. Ethan started writing again, short stories that captured the ache and joy of his new life. But challenges remained. Ethan's co-workers whispered when he mentioned Lucas, and Mark distanced himself, their friendship fraying. Ethan felt the sting of rejection, but Lucas's love was a shield, helping him face the world with new courage. One spring evening, as they walked through the High Line, Lucas stopped and turned to Ethan. "I love you," he said, his voice steady, his eyes locked on Ethan's. Ethan's breath caught. He'd felt it for weeks, maybe months, but saying it felt like crossing a threshold. "I love you too," he said, and the words felt like freedom. They kissed for the first time under a canopy of blooming flowers, the city humming around them. Ethan felt whole, like he'd finally found the piece of himself he'd been missing. Summer brought a new rhythm to their lives. Ethan and Lucas were inseparable, their days filled with laughter and quiet moments of understanding. They moved in together, combining their lives in Lucas's tiny apartment, where canvases leaned against walls and Ethan's books filled the shelves. But the world outside their bubble wasn't always welcoming. Ethan faced subtle prejudice at work, sideways glances, hush comments. He ignored them, focusing on the life he was building with Lucas. They hosted dinner parties for Lucas's friends, who became Ethan's too, their warmth a stark contrast to the coldness of his old life. One day, Ethan received a letter from Sarah. She'd heard about Lucas through mutual friends and wanted to meet. Ethan hesitated, but Lucas encouraged him. "Closure's important," he said. "You don't have to carry that weight anymore." They met at a neutral spot, a quiet cafe not unlike the one where Ethan had met Lucas. Sarah looked different, calmer, but older, like the divorce had aged her too. "I'm happy for you," she said, her voice genuine but tinged with sadness. "I just wish we'd been honest with ourselves sooner." Ethan nodded, the guilt he'd carried loosening its grip. "Me too," he said. They parted with a hug, not the desperate kind, but one that acknowledged their shared past and let it go. Back home, Ethan told Lucas about the meeting, and Lucas listened, his hand resting on Ethan's knee. "You okay?" he asked. "Better than okay," Ethan said, leaning into him. "I'm free." Their love grew stronger, but so did the challenges. Lucas's art career was struggling, his commissions barely covering rent. Ethan offered to help, but Lucas was proud, determined to make it on his own. Tensions flared one night when Lucas came home frustrated, his latest painting rejected by a gallery. "I'm not enough," Lucas snapped, his voice breaking. "Not for them. Maybe not for you." Ethan pulled him close, refusing to let him spiral. "You're everything to me," he said, his voice fierce. "We'll figure this out together." They did. Ethan helped Lucas set up an online portfolio, and slowly, commissions started coming in. Ethan, too, found new purpose, submitting his stories to literary magazines. One was accepted, a small victory that felt monumental. Their life wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. They fought. They laughed. They loved with a ferocity that made every moment matter. Ethan learned that love wasn't about perfection, it was about showing up. Every day, for the person who saw you completely. One evening, as they watched the sunset from their rooftop, Lucas turned to Ethan. "You changed my life," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't know I could love like this." Ethan smiled, his heart full. "You changed mine too." As fall painted New York in shades of amber and red, Ethan and Lucas faced their biggest test. Lucas's father, who hadn't spoken to him since he came out, reached out unexpectedly. He was sick, and he wanted to see his son. Lucas was torn, the wounds of rejection still fresh. "I don't know if I can do this," Lucas admitted, his voice shaking as they sat on their couch. Ethan held his hand, feeling the weight of Lucas's pain. "You don't have to decide now," Ethan said. "But if you go, I'm going with you." They flew to Ohio, the trip heavy with unspoken fears. Lucas's father, frail and gray, greeted them with a tentative smile. The visit was awkward, filled with long silences and careful words. But over the weekend, something shifted. Lucas's father apologized, his voice choked with regret. "I was wrong," he said. "I just want you to be happy." Lucas cried, and Ethan held him, their hands clasped under the table. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was a start. On the flight home, Lucas leaned against Ethan, his eyes red but lighter. "Thank you," he whispered, "for being my strength." Back in New York, Ethan faced his own family. His parents invited him to Thanksgiving, their first gesture since he'd come out to them. He brought Lucas, nervous but determined. The dinner was tense, with stilted conversation and awkward glances. But Lucas's warmth, his easy laughter, softened the room. By the end of the night, Ethan's mother hugged Lucas, a small gesture that felt like a victory. Their love became a beacon, not just for them, but for others. Ethan started a blog, sharing his journey of self-discovery and love. It resonated with strangers across the country, people questioning their own identities, searching for courage. Lucas's art, too, gained attention, his paintings a vivid reflection of their shared journey. One night, as they lay in bed, Lucas traced circles on Ethan's palm. "I want to grow old with you," he said, his voice soft but certain. Ethan's heart swelled. "Me too." They talked about the future, traveling, maybe adopting a dog, building a life that was unapologetically theirs. Ethan realized that love wasn't just a feeling, it was a choice, a commitment to face the world together, no matter what. As the year drew to a close, Ethan looked back on the man he'd been in that cafe, broken and lost. He'd found more than love with Lucas. He'd found himself. And in every touch, every hug, he learned that connection was the truest form of healing. On a crisp December evening, Ethan and Lucas stood on the Brooklyn Bridge, the city's lights sparkling like stars against the night sky. They'd come here to celebrate Lucas's first solo art show was a success, and Ethan's second story had been published in a prestigious magazine. But the real celebration was them, their love, their resilience. Ethan looked at Lucas, his breath catching at the sight of him, his blonde hair catching the glow of the streetlights, his eyes full of quiet joy. "I was lost before you," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. "You showed me how to be whole again." Lucas smiled, pulling Ethan close. "You did that yourself. I just gave you a hug when you needed it." They laughed, the sound mingling with the hum of the city. Ethan thought about the journey they'd taken, the doubts, the fears, the moments of courage that had brought them here. He thought about the people they'd touched, the lives they'd changed, simply by being honest about who they were. As they walked off the bridge, hand in hand, Ethan felt a profound gratitude. Love, he realized, wasn't just about grand gestures or perfect moments. It was about the small touches, the hand on his arm in a cafe, the hug that held him together, the quiet presence of someone who saw him completely. They stopped at a street vendor, buying hot chocolate to warm their hands. Lucas raised his cup in a mock toast. "To us," he said. "To every hug, every fight, every moment we choose each other." Ethan clinked his cup against Lucas's, his heart full. "To us," he echoed. As they sipped their drinks, the city buzzed around them, alive with possibility. Ethan knew there would be more challenges, prejudice, doubt, the weight of a world that didn't always understand. But with Lucas by his side, he felt ready to face anything. Their story wasn't just about love. It was about the power of human connection, the way a single touch could spark a transformation. Ethan had needed a hug, and what followed had changed everything, not just for him, but for the way he understood the world. They walked home, their shoulders brushing, their laughter a quiet rebellion against the darkness. And in that moment, Ethan knew this was what it meant to be truly, fully alive.